I'll never forget the sight of Karen standing at the end of my driveway that evening. Her face flushed purple with rage, lips trembling as she waved a stack of HOA paperwork like it was the declaration of war. Red and blue lights from the police cruiser painted her in surreal strokes, her wild gesturing casting monstrous shadows across my freshly installed ranch gate. But what happened next? Shut down the entire street. Instead of marching up to slap handcuffs on me, as Karen was clearly drooling to witness, the two officers stepped out, surveyed the scene, and then did something that nearly made her jaw slam into the pavement. They saluted me. Saluted. But to understand how we got to that jaw-dropping moment, we need to rewind 3 weeks. After 2 years of dealing with the HOA's nitpicking nonsense, I finally pulled the trigger on a project I'd been planning since the day I moved in, a custom ranch-style gate. As a retired Army veteran with 25 years of service, privacy and security weren't optional. They were sacred. The gate I installed wasn't an eyesore. It was a statement. Elegant wrought iron with rich wooden inlays, standing 6 feet tall at the entrance of my property. Automatic opener. Discreet lighting. Every detail carefully chosen to complement the home I'd worked my whole life to earn. Within 24 hours, the Karen storm arrived. She's our self-appointed HOA president. No one remembers ever voting for her, and she came in hot, sending me her first love letter. 3 full pages, single-spaced, passionately outlining how my gate violated subsection 12.4 of the community's so-called aesthetic standards. It read like a courtroom drama with a sprinkle of horror. Here's the thing though, unlike Karen, I actually read the HOA bylaws. Every single page. Military habits die hard. I don't make moves without doing recon. And according to those documents, I was well within my rights. But Karen wasn't the type to let reality get in the way of a good crusade. Over the next few days, her messages multiplied like rats in a storm drain. First came the blinding yellow warning notices. Then the fines, starting at $50, then somehow leaping to $500 overnight. Each letter more dramatic, more hysterical than the last, demanding I dismantle my hazardous monstrosity, or face the full wrath of the Homeowners Association. I read every note, smiled, and filed them neatly in a folder marked Evidence, right beside my permits and compliance approvals. But the real show came on day 3. A special delivery appeared at dawn. Karen had evidently spent the whole night drafting a laminated cease and desist order, complete with clip art of gavels and golden scales of justice. She'd taped it dead center on my gate eye level, like some neighborhood bulletin of shame. By 6:15 a.m., the early dog walkers were already stopping to read it, some even snapping photos. I didn't tear it down, didn't yell. Instead, I walked out with my coffee, still in my robe and slippers, and read the whole thing out loud like I was enjoying the Sunday paper. Then I looked straight at her window, gave a thumbs up, and slipped it into the evidence folder with a smile. I could practically hear her screaming from 3 houses away. By the end of the week, Karen had recruited her loyal lieutenants, 3 board members who acted more like palace guards than community volunteers. They marched past my house daily in tight formation, pointing, whispering, casting judgmental glances like my property had suddenly become a military installation. I watched them from my window, coffee in hand, waving like I was on parade. And they had no idea what was coming next. They glared at me like a firing squad, standing at the edge of the sidewalk in stiff formation. But the more I smiled and waved, the more it seemed to ignite something volcanic in Karen. Her fury wasn't cooling, it was evolving. And she had found her second in command. Barbara, the HOA treasurer, was Karen's faithful lieutenant in this escalating suburban war. She was rarely seen without her pearl necklace, reading glasses on a chain, and an ever-present measuring tape dangling from her cardigan like a badge of office. One morning, I caught her trying to measure my gate from the sidewalk, stretching the tape measurer to its absolute limit while balancing on her tiptoes like a giraffe reaching for forbidden fruit. I offered her the official dimensions straight from my approved building plans. She recoiled as if I'd handed her a live grenade. "I don't need help from rule breakers," she snapped. The whole situation started to resemble a sitcom, If the sitcom had been written by Kafka and directed by Hitchcock. That's when Karen convened what she dramatically called an emergency beautification committee meeting. The sole purpose. My gate. She distributed black and white flyers to every house on the street, each one featuring the most unflattering photos of my gate possible, snapped at awkward angles and clearly taken in poor lighting to make it look like a prison barricade. The meeting was set for 7 p.m. on a Thursday at her house. According to my neighbor Tom, only 5 people showed up. 2 of them thought it was the neighborhood book club. But even that wasn't enough for Karen. She was no longer satisfied with warning letters, fines, or laminated threats. She wanted real power. She wanted consequences. So she did what any suburban tyrant backed into a corner might do. She called 911. She reported my gate as a hazardous obstruction, claiming it blocked emergency vehicle access and posed an immediate danger to public safety. I wouldn't have believed it if Tom hadn't overheard her, practically screaming the words into the phone from her open porch. I didn't panic. I just made sure my documentation folder was in perfect order. But Karen wasn't done. Over the next 48 hours, she launched a bureaucratic blitzkrieg. The fire department, the building inspector, even animal control. Her complaint. My gate was traumatizing local pets. Yes, that was the actual wording. Each agency dutifully sent a representative. And each time they left shaking their heads, baffled at the sheer pettiness of it all. The fire chief actually complimented my gate's emergency sensors, which automatically open for service vehicles. That's smarter than half the new builds in town, he said. The morning everything came to a head, Karen was on a full-blown campaign. She went door to door with a petition to have me removed from the neighborhood entirely. Most people didn't even open their doors. Those who did, well, they weren't shy. Mrs. Chen, 2 houses down, actually laughed in her face and said, "If anything, that gate raised my property value. Finally, this neighborhood has some class." And then came the climax. That evening, the police cruiser rolled slowly down the street, headlights sweeping across our perfectly trimmed lawns. Karen saw it first and took off at a dead sprint from her house 3 doors down, clutching her stack of printed violations like they were sacred scrolls. She reached the cruiser before the officers could even shut off the engine. Her voice launched into a well-rehearsed monologue about code violations, flagrant disregard for HOA authority, and the impending collapse of neighborhood property values. I let her perform. Then I stepped out of my house, calm, composed, folder in hand. While Karen was practically foaming at the mouth, I quietly introduced myself to the officers. I presented every document in order. Building permits, property survey showing the gate was entirely on my land, the ADA compliance certificate, even the letter from the fire department verifying that emergency access was fully operational. Officer Martinez took his time examining the documents while his partner, Officer Nguyen, nodded along. Meanwhile, Karen's voice grew louder, more frantic. And then Martinez noticed the small bronze plaque mounted discreetly at the side of the gate. He leaned in to read it, and suddenly straightened up. The bronze plaque I had mounted beside the gate caught Officer Martinez's eye. He stepped closer, leaned in, and read aloud. Master Sergeant William Hayes, United States Army, retired. There was a beat of silence. Then he looked at me, looked back at the plaque, looked at me again, and without another word, Officer Martinez snapped to attention and delivered a crisp, formal salute. His partner, Officer Chen, followed suit instantly. "Thank you for your service, Sergeant Hayes," Martinez said, his voice ringing clear in the cool evening air. By then, half the neighborhood had emerged from their homes, drawn by the flashing lights, the commotion, and now this. Karen stood frozen on the sidewalk, her mouth working open and closed like a beached fish. The stack of HOA violation papers shook in her hands as her illusion of control dissolved in front of the entire community. She tried to say something, some last grasp at dominance. The HOA rules supersede. But Officer Chen raised a hand, silencing her without effort. "Ma'am," he said with an edge that silenced the crowd, What you've done tonight could be considered harassment and a gross misuse of emergency services. The sergeant's gate is entirely legal, fully permitted, and poses no threat to emergency access. Frankly, you've wasted our time with a frivolous, malicious complaint." He paused, eyes hard. "You'd be wise to reconsider your approach before someone files charges against you." A murmur spread through the crowd like a slow ripple across water. Karen's face cycled through every hue of embarrassment: red, pink, ash white. Her voice, which had roared with the fury of imagined authority minutes earlier, had all but disappeared into a barely audible whisper. I was just trying to uphold community standards." The officers weren't interested. They turned to me, thanked me again for my service, and nodded toward the gate. "Nice craftsmanship," Martinez added before they walked back to the cruiser and drove away. The silence left in their wake was almost sacred. I turned to face the gathered neighbors. No grand speech, no gloating, just a simple, respectful nod. Then I walked through my gate. The automatic opener kicked in with a quiet hum, and the gate shut behind me with a soft but unmistakable click. The sound echoed down the street like a gavel. Karen remained rooted to the sidewalk, her documents now drooping at her side like a defeated battle flag. One by one, the neighbors began to disperse, some shaking their heads, others whispering with disgust. 3 weeks later, I received a letter from the HOA board. It was short and direct. Karen had been formally removed as president following a flurry of complaints regarding abuse of power and harassment of homeowners. The board apologized for the unnecessary inconvenience and confirmed that my gate was a welcomed improvement to the community's aesthetics and security. I chuckled as I read it. Then I stepped outside and raised a small American flag on the pole I'd just installed next to my gate. It would remain there as a permanent reminder of the night everything changed. But the story wasn't over, not yet. Turns out, Karen's tantrum had exposed more than her temper. The HOA's internal audit, spurred by the incident, uncovered a treasure trove of misdeeds. For years, Karen had been misusing association funds, billing personal purchases as community improvements, landscaping fees, buddies, emergency reserve for neighborhood repairs, a marble countertop in her kitchen. A forensic accountant uncovered over $30,000 in questionable expenses during her 5-year reign of petty tyranny. Word spread fast. First through the neighborhood social groups, then to local news. The headline practically wrote itself. HOA president faces criminal charges after harassment campaign backfires. Karen's smug real estate headshot was plastered on the evening news. Neighbors lined up to share their own stories of bullying, fines, threats, and vendettas. For some it was cathartic. For others it was justice. But the final blow. Her employer, a local real estate firm, caught wind of the scandal. Turns out, having your HOA president trending online for all the wrong reasons wasn't great for business. She was quietly let go. Her real estate license under review. The last time I saw her, she was shoving cardboard boxes into the trunk of her Lexus, avoiding eye contact like it burned. I stood at my driveway, coffee in hand, and watched as she drove away. And then, as if on cue, she opened a letter. The $5,000 fine the HOA levied against her for misappropriating funds had arrived. Her gasp was audible from across the street.